Hey everyone, welcome back to Black Ass Our History Presents. Y'all late to the revolution. Y'all, we moving into chapter 3. This is Revelations in the Midst of an Evolution. And this is the Harlem Renaissance. So first, to give you all context, let's talk about this new Negro movement. The content, images, and language that you're about to experience may be offensive and may lead to triggers. Viewer discretion is advised. Black Ass Our History is committed and dedicated to educating its audiences on the diaspora of melanated people with the intent to provide an honest and holistic history of our narratives. We are committed to ensuring our history and stories are not filtered through white supremacy, indoctrination, dogma, and pseudo social science. I think it's important as we look at the new Negro movement to understand that when there is a social political movement, there is often an artistic or creative movement that emerges and echoes the narratives of these movements. The new Negro movement is a moment in time where Black voices are now speaking out about who they are. They are now generations removed from when their original Black ancestors were first forced onto this land. So now there's distant memories, traditions, language, culture, and now at this time for nearly 4 million Black Americans, it is a requirement for them to come to terms with their freedom and who they are. So I'm just going to go through for the timeline. This is 1865 to about 1960 and just highlight a few things. So, even in the midst of the Civil War, Reconstruction happened, and this was America's way of going through to help integrate the newly released enslaved persons into the folds of the U.S. One of the items to come out of that was the Freedmen's Bureau. This assisted former enslaved persons in the South and Washington, D.C. with assistance, acquiring land, locate family, establishing schools, etc. However, I also want to mention that also during this time that this was the most time we had African Americans in both the Senate and the House of Representatives. However, come 1877, Reconstruction ends. And honestly, it's leaving things really still unamended because as soon as the troops withdrew, the South regained state legislation of power, black codes, Jim Crow laws, vehement racism would just reemerge. And of course, numerous amount of lynchings. So in 1892, Ida B. Wells, a beautiful Black woman and a prolific writer, begins to talk about the lynching of her three friends in Memphis, Tennessee. The Free Speech Office, which she co-founded, set on fire. 1895, Booker T. Washington gives the Atlanta Compromise speech, where he stresses the importance of trade and vocational education over social and political equality. We have more W.E.B. Du Bois published Soul of Black Folks. Crisis Magazine is created, Urban League. And in 1914, Marcus Garvey founds the United Negro Improvement Association. In 1916 is where we really see the Great Migration begin. So, with the South post Reconstruction, essentially the South again regains control of the local and state legislation. Many of the free Black people return to the plantations, not as slaves, but as sharecroppers, and working the same land, residing in the same homes, and often being owned or working for the same person, which had to give up their freedom. So again, it really much wasn't a shift. There was some leeway for some families, but for majority of the Black families in the South, it was really going right back into the folds of what they just were granted freedom from. So believe it or not, the Great Migration actually lasted from 1910 to 1970 as two waves. We're going to look at the first wave, which is the first Great Migration from 1910 to 1940. So again, we're escaping Jim Crow laws, discrimination. We're looking for education and employment opportunities. Cities would include the Midwest and North cities, Philadelphia, Detroit, Cincinnati, New York, Chicago, Pittsburgh, DC, you named it. That's where they were headed. And the reason that the Great Migration really happened is because during World War I, many Americans were drafted and headed off to war. And because of World War I, there's a lot of immigration bans on certain European countries. And then because there was a lean for filling in for all those jobs post-industrial revolution, these are the opportunities that Black folks got to take. So, although I'm jumping ahead, this is one of the Harlem Renaissance artists we're actually going to look into in detail a little bit later, but this is Jacob Lawrence. He created this beautiful series called the Migration Series. It's 61 panels of temper paintings that shows the full narrative or a complete narrative of the Black migration from the South to the North. So here we have hundreds of Black families or people waiting to board trains. What is so important about this series? It is critical for us to be able to tell the story of the migration. Without some of these images, we would have not known all the cities that Black folks went to. We would have not known all the trials and tribulations and successes that they've had on this journey to the Great Migration. So let's take a step forward real quick. So, a new Negro. As Black folks are migrating toward a new future of themselves, having only again that small remnants of their ancestors' connection to homeland, language, cuisine, this came an opportunity for Black people to define themselves for themselves. In the late 1800s, we also saw an emergence of numerous historical Black colleges and universities, Black people becoming educators, obtaining skilled trades and jobs, and even going to Ivy League schools. Soon, Black communities would emerge, including Black organizations, social groups, and societies to create opportunities that supported, funded, and assist Black people. So I thought it would be interesting to break down something that I truly believe helps us understand what was happening in that time. So during the early 1900s, to the 1940s Harlem Renaissance, during the Harlem Renaissance, what we do have is three fundamental different ideas. We have Booker T. Washington, we have W.E.B. Du Bois, and we have Marcus Garvey. So Booker T. Washington, ultimately he was focused on education and trade and business, that Black people would be able to make an impact that way, and racism and discrimination would eventually erode. DeWitt was focus was political participation, ensuring our rights through the top 10% of the intellectual African American leading the way. This is what we know as the talented 10th. So he's saying that social and political activism is the way. My Jamaican brother Marcus Garvey said, nah, we just need to do all this on our own. We need to create our own. We don't need to integrate. And we need to connect back with our African and Caribbean brothers and sisters. So essentially, Booker T would found Tuskegee Normal and Industrial Institute, which is Tuskegee University, believed in industrial education. He did not want to focus on social equality or equity with whites. W.E.B. Du Bois was a socialist, talented 10th, believed in a broad liberal arts education, and he was also one of the founders of the NAACP. Marcus Garvey, on the other hand, emphasized unity between Africans and African Americans. He founded the UNIA, um, the United Negro Improvement Association, desired all of Africa to be unified under one party state and the Black Star Line. Marcus Garvey was chartering ships to take Black folks back to Africa. So during this time, we have three fundamental ideas about what Black people should do in our liberation, which I just find fascinating as well. But let's look at another critical figure, Alain Leroy Locke. So he was born to a middle class family in Philadelphia, and Locke would go on to attend and graduate from Harvard University. Locke is critical. He's considered the kind of the father of the Harlem Renaissance. He he was the first African American to receive the Rhodes Scholarship and would go on to Oxford University. And after that, he went to the University of Berlin. He was an assistant professor of philosophy at Howard University in 1912. Locke would actually go back to Harvard, get his PhD in 1921, and return to Howard as the chair of the philosophy department. And there's also this buzzing word of the New Negro movement. So this is attributed to Hubert Harrison. He was a West Indies immigrant and founded this in 1916 and 1917. He also founded the first Negro Movement organization under the New Negro Movement, the Liberty League, and the first New Negro Movement periodical, The Voice. This movement was interesting because it was both race conscious and class conscious. Again, we're now getting introduced to this idea of a black middle class. This was a book that definitely impacted my life. Even though this book is nearly 100 years old, it is critical writing. This was originally published in 1925. It's The New Negro in Interpretation. It was an anthology that highlighted politics, sociology, nonfiction, fiction, poetry, visual art, and the impact of music. It would include some of the most prolific writers of the Harlem Renaissance. And during the time of the Harlem Renaissance, John Toomer, Countee Cullen, Langston Hughes, Zora Neale Hurston, Eric Walford. Musicians such as Duke Ellington, William Grant Still, Gershwin, who did Porgy and Bess. Also, a German artist by the name of Winnow Reese, who actually had a close connection with the Black community, and muralist and artist Aaron Douglas. Other contributions would be from James Weldon Johnson, W.E.B. Du Bois, and more. The book is broken out into this conversation of comparing the old Negro to the new Negro. And essentially, the new Negro now has the ability to move beyond this inferiority complex that we were forced to adopt to stand firmly in who we are. It talks about what the new Negro looks like. It also talks about some of the writings and ideas that are coming out to this liberated mind and movement. Now, although this was a critically acclaimed book and widely accepted, Locke's New Negro did receive some criticism, as well as Harrison's New Negro movement. For the book, W.E.B. Du Bois criticized it simply as an intellectual and cultural artistic production movement. How would this translate into political social advancement for Black people? Some criticized it as a fast for so-called good-meaning white folk to jump on board and celebrate the Negro until white folks got tired and found something else to enjoy. Wallace Thurman, who is part of the Niggerati Manor, yes, that is the name of the Bohemian young Black writing group, was just suspicious of the Black middle class and white patrons influencing and controlling these young and upcoming writers who acted as their sponsor and also might have influenced them and pushed the idea of respectability politics. Marcus Garvey was suspicious of it all. Keep in mind, he's a Pan Africanist and Black nationalist, and he's looking at the Black middle class and the uppity Negro and these intellectual Negroes as just some dark skinned whites. So we're going to do a quick recap. I just wanted to provide a context and framework. The Emancipation Proclamation of 1863, Reconstruction from 1863 to 1877, did little to help the newly freed enslaved Africans, resulting to many of them still being owned in some capacity by the white owners as sharecroppers. There was an increase of African American senators and representatives being voted in. However, once the southern states got control of state and local legislation, Black codes and Jim Crow was enforced heavily. Many African Americans migrated to the North due to employment opportunities, as well as to attend the many HBCUs opening. Scholarship, politics, speeches, um, organizers emerged in the northern states to assist African Americans transition from the South to the North. Debates, dialogues, and writings would emerge, debating what is next for the Negro. What exactly is the new Negro? And how do we become this being? Thank you all for watching for chapter 3 part 1, the new Negro movement. Tomorrow we're going to look into why Harlem was the place to be. Y'all take care and have a great day.